Well, awesome. Welcome, everyone, to the Elemental Awakening Show. My guest this week is Dmitry Buterin from Toronto, Ontario. And it's an interesting story how we met. We met first in the on the internet, and Facebook. And a mutual friend of ours shared one of his posts, and it was really intriguing. And so I started following him, and I started realizing most of his posts were very intriguing or funny, or some of them I didn't understand at all because they were in Russian, or it was some sort of Russian humor that I couldn't get, but it was still very interesting. And then I reached out to him. We became friends. I think you ended up watching my documentary.
Yeah.
And we hung out a couple of times. And I actually repost a lot of his stuff on Psyched Out. So if you guys are following Psyched Out, the documentary, I post a lot of that. So when I asked him how to introduce him, he said he's not a big fan of labels, which I think is a really good thing to say. It's the perfect answer for that question. But after that, he followed saying he's a serial tech entrepreneur in recovery, which I found quite funny. But I think there's a lot of truth in that. So tell us a bit about yourself and what you do now, or how you got to what you're doing now.
Sure. How early do you want me to go back?
Whatever feels natural. Maybe from before coming to Canada.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I grew up in the good old Soviet Union. Actually, in a place called Chechnya. That's where I grew up, and it's in the south of Russia. So it's always funny when you start talking to people. They have all these stereotypes. Oh, you play hockey, you drink vodka, or whatever. You love snow, and I grew up without snow, and now I actually don't drink at all. I never really had much vodka, and never played hockey. So anyways,
So what did you do then?
yeah, exactly, right. Well, I was playing chess and reading books, basically.
Okay.
That was my childhood. And then I went to Moscow to study, and I studied computer science. I lived in Moscow for about 10 years, and then at the age of 27, 20 years ago, I moved to Toronto. And this is where I've been living. I will be soon celebrating exactly 20 years since I arrived to Canada, to Toronto.
And why Toronto? Was there something about it that brought you here, or just?
Like, first it was a decision which country to go to, and there was a bunch of different things. One of them, it was actually pretty easy for a tech guy to immigrate into Canada. It's still relatively easy, but it used to be much more sensible than it is now. We looked at Australia and Canada and whatnot, and Canada made more sense. It's closer to things.
And you had a family at the time?
Say again?
At the time you had a family, so it wasn't just you leaving. You were leaving
right.
as a group, right?
Yeah.
Family.
And my current wife, her mom already lived here, and so a bunch of considerations. And then within Canada, Toronto made logical sense as a big city, close to other big cities in North America. Yeah,
and was there a reason why you left? Like, did you just want to try something new, or did you?
So it was end of '99, and actually Putin just came into power. And it's kind of crazy that he still is in power in Russia. And looking back, looking at what he did to the country, I'm really happy that I made the decision that I did. So, frankly, it was not so much about my concern what's going to happen there, but more my desire to explore the world and look at something else outside of.
So what was that like coming to Canada? Was it like, did you have any idea how different it would be, and what were the main differences that really stood out to you?
Well, I already had been abroad by that time because after studying at the university, I had a job for a few years at this big U.S. company, Arthur Andersen, their Moscow office, and worked as an IT consultant, computer systems consultant, and we worked with a lot of foreign companies. And working there, I had a chance to go to different places outside of Soviet Union. And then after that, started my first business still back in Russia. And that business was a joint venture with some Danish software companies. So I ended up spending a lot of time in Denmark. So by that time that I moved to Canada, I spoke decent English, and I kind of knew what to expect. So it was not as big of a deal as it is for many immigrants.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
And so I'm ignorant to what life was like in Russia, but communism, do they really allow for religious practice or spirituality? Is that something that is frowned upon, or it's only one way?
Right. Yeah, and first of all, it's interesting that people call it communism, because the way I've been brought up, is that we actually lived in socialism, and the socialism was supposed to become communism at some, bright point in the future, because basically when you live in communism, then you work as little or as much as you want to, and then you get as little or as much of stuff as you want. That's the idea of communism. Everything is free, and you can work and not work. And socialism is not like that. So we lived in socialism, and so everything is done by the government, right? And that creates a certain mentality. And living through that, kind of growing up, there are a lot of things that you learn. Like one thing you learn, not to trust the authority, the government, because you realize that it's propaganda or just pure bullshit. And then also you realize that all those supposedly free services like education and healthcare, they really sucked, right? Because when you try to centralize a very complex decision making, then it's really hard to make good decisions. And that's what I watched firsthand, right? Like looking back, growing up in the Soviet Union, it's like, oh yeah, so this month it's really hard to get toilet paper because the Central Planning Committee didn't plan for toilet paper for the whole bloody country properly, right? And this month you can get toilet paper, well, maybe, but not toothbrushes, right? And so on, right? So it was pretty crazy. But the whole environment, it's in living in this socialist environment, and also it's really hard to, how to put this, what you can achieve, there is a ceiling to that, right? For most people. So if you want to get more, really, the only way is to become part of the elites, their Communist Party. But otherwise, the range is very narrow, and you can be...
So can the common person just start a business? Has it changed?
No, businesses, they were not... Exist. Yeah, they did not exist, right? So I didn't have that concept at all in my head, right?
So when you partnered with the Danish company, it had to be like a foreign partnership in your case. Was that how that worked?
No, because the Soviet Union started falling apart when I was at the university.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah, basically by the early 90s, when I was out of the university, it was already who knows what, Wild West pretty much, right?
Wild West.
And going back to your original question about religion and spirituality, I was brought up with a lot of Soviet propaganda that religion is bad, bad. It's all a scam. It's all ready to bamboozle their populace and whatnot. And it's so funny to see how Putin is actually now using religion as another tool to control the populace, right? So they kind of using a lot of the same old Soviet era playbooks, but they also using some other playbooks.
They're running out of tools, so now they're kind of going deep in the pocket, right?
Pretty much.
It's interesting. So how was your so when you came here, you kept working, you started another company when you came to Toronto?
Yes, when I came over, I was still involved in that first business that we had, that we started back in Russia, and I was involved on kind of as a board of directors member, and was going back and forth from time to time. But then I got involved in a startup here first, and then tried to start a couple of businesses, and then eventually in 2006 I started a business called Wild Apricot and spent about 11, 12 years on that business.
Tell us about it. What was the business about?
The business was software for small nonprofits.
Okay.
Basically, back in 2006, the whole concept of software as a service was being developed. And before that, we had a business where we're building custom software for organizations. And custom software is very expensive, right? So unless your enterprise with deep pockets, it's kind of hard to impossible to afford that. And back then, again, the concept of open source was very not as well developed as now. So you kind of had to build a lot of stuff from scratch, reinventing the wheel, and that's very expensive work. And the concept was kind of simple. Oh, why don't we build this big, expensive, customizable piece of software, but instead of trying to sell it to big nonprofits, we kind of try to sell it as a subscription. And that's what we did, and we built a pretty substantial business over more than a decade of doing that. We had more than 10,000 small nonprofits using our software.
Wow, it's impressive.
Yeah. And it was kind of all-in-one system, running their website, donations, event management, sending out emails, and so on.
Very cool. So, as an entrepreneur, what do you think was one or two most important factors to success? Does it have to do with like team building? Was it leadership? What for you do you think was one of the most important factors?
I'll give you a very broad answer too, because for me, I have this saying that three best tools for personal development and growth are your relationship, your kids, and then your business, right? And the business.
So what was the second one?
Your kids.
Your kids. Okay.
Your relationship, and then your business, right? And business, I definitely realized kind of over those couple of decades of building different businesses as a wonderful, wonderful tool of growth, because basically your business cannot grow if you do not grow yourself, right? And looking back at my trajectory when I first got into business, right, like at that time I was still very much a technical guy, right, and I had a very technical, kind of managerial but technical role. And then I had to go through many cycles of learning, like, oh, business is not just about, okay, so our business was about software, but business is not about building software, but it's really about building and then selling it to clients and so on, right? Oh, what's selling? What's marketing, right? What's business development? And then also realizing that actually, it's actually way more important to, and way more difficult to do that than actually build software, because building software, that's interacting with computers. They're complicated but kind of predictable, and selling and marketing, that's interacting with people. People are crazy and not predictable at all, right? Mm-hmm. So that was kind of first cycle of learning for me, going away from like just being a technical guy to realizing their whole, their necessity, importance of business development as such, and sales and marketing, and then also kind of. As a system thinker, starting to think about business as an engine. Okay, so business is an engine, and you have all these different parts to the business. You have your production, and in this case, software development. You have your sales and marketing. You have your finances, and so on, right? So that was the next stage of learning, thinking about business as an engine. Then also, further stages were like, business is really about people, because this is an engine, but part of that engine, the critical parts are people, and psychology of people. And that's kind of started a whole new cycle of learning about psychology and coaching, and how do you motivate people and all of that stuff, right? And then eventually thinking about business structures. And by the end of at their tail end of running that business, we actually implemented a very different business structure, what that's called Teal, kind of somewhat similar to holacracy, so very decentralized business structure, right? So
tell me a bit about that. How does that work, the Teal?
So again, most businesses up until this day, they run in a very hierarchical manner, right? There's and the model basically assumes that there's this awesome, brilliant, smart guy who is the CEO, and he's paid many millions of dollars, and he makes this
always the
extremely
right
right decisions, and then those decisions are implemented by the minions, through the layers of hierarchy, right? But obviously that doesn't make any sense, especially in the modern world where you have so many smart people. And again, my experience, I always been
so many moving pieces,
right? And I always been a tech entrepreneur, right? In the tech business, you have lots of software engineers, and they're all crazy smart people, right? So trying to, like, this one guy trying to make decisions and telling them what to do, that just doesn't make sense in any business, but especially in technology-related business. So the question becomes, okay, how do you actually leverage their potential of everybody in the organization, right? And spend a lot of time thinking about that, and trying different things, going through many different iterations and models. And people familiar with software development, many of them have heard about the concept of agile software development. Basically, the idea is that instead of trying to predict your project at the outset and build this very, very complex plan for months and years ahead, you kind of try to create the overall direction, and then you do a lot of small iterations. So that's agile software development. And after many years of software development, many decades, people realize, this is the best way to run the software. And eventually they realized, oh, but what about the rest of the organization? So let's say that this is how you build the software, but then the rest of your organization tries to operate on this very old school hierarchical, what's called waterfall model, when you try to plan and predict in advance. And this just doesn't work. Again, going back to my experience in the Soviet Union, and I saw all the failures of central planning, like it just doesn't work. So then, okay, how do you try to leverage the same concepts beyond just software engineering, but apply it to other functions in the business? That was the idea. And it was, I always been reading a lot, and eventually I came across this wonderful book called Reinventing Organizations by a Belgian guy, Frederic Laloux. And that book made so much sense to me, and that I brought it back to our leadership team and say, hey guys, check out this book. And it really resonated with many people.
How do you spell the last name?
Laloux.
L-A-L-O.
Laloux, if I'm not mistaken.
I'll look at it.
And because we've built a team over the years of people well aligned, if you will, philosophically in terms of our mission and core values and whatnot, that book really resonated with them too. And then we went on this journey of implementing this new structure, very decentralized. And that was a lot of painful work and effort, but I would say that after a couple of years, we were pretty much there. And then we solved the business, and it kind of all fell apart because the conflict of the new, ownership and their views of which were very traditional.
So did they try to go back to the more...
Pretty much, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, but anyway, so it was a wonderful experience while it lasted. And whenever I talk to my former colleagues and business partners, they all see huge benefit in working in this kind of structure. Because again, in the business, how do you get the most out of people? It's not by telling smart people, hey, you go there and do this. And I always knew that, because even when you build a piece of software, one way to do this is like you have some guy comes up with some, this is how the way the screen should look like, and this is the sequence of, actions, algorithms, and then you give it to software engineer, like go and build it this way. But then he's a smart guy, very smart guy, so he comes back with feedback. Oh, what about if we do it slightly differently and this way and that way? Have you thought about this, right? And that's always been the way we've been running our business, with a lot of feedback loops. And then this Teal structure was a very natural evolution from that. So, and basically the concept of Teal structure is that instead of hierarchy, you have this floating soup of different teams, and you push down decision making as close to the front line as possible. So people who have the most information about customer service, your customer service agents. So you try to delegate the decisions about customer service to them. And software engineers, they make decisions about software.
Is there still like a CEO somewhere in the mix there?
Very complex question. Yes and no. I still had a role as, if you will, we actually call that role more of a safeguard. So a person who makes sure that the thing still is synchronized somewhat, but as we're kind of going down that path, that role was becoming less and less, how to put this, less and less important short term, important long term, but not as a decision maker, right? My role stopped being decision maker, but it was more of the carrier of some core values, and doing a lot of intakes of new employees, and coordination between teams and stuff like that. Cool. Yeah.
Do you know of any large corporations that use a similar model to this?
The famous organization that went through a lot of controversy around that is Zappos, because they use this model, Zappos, that was purchased by Amazon, right? And they use the model called holacracy. And Teal is a kind of broader label, which includes a bunch of different submodels, and holacracy is one of them.
Cool.
So yeah, but it's been used by many small organizations, some medium and some larger organizations, right? And lots of experimentation is still going on.
Very cool. Very cool. I love it. Yeah, it's time for change in the corporate world.
Yeah, big time.
Big time. I think that'll also help create a better direction that's more inclusive of more people. When there's less people making decisions, I think they focus strictly on what they want, and a lot of people at the top of those structures are very maybe egocentric, Whereas when it's a whole team of people making decisions, there's a lot more people like thinking about like other impacts than just what the CEOs and their main objectives are. You think that's a fair
Right.
statement?
Yes, like in general, there are so many important details to this topic, and one of them is the concept of skin in the game. If you're familiar with Nassim Taleb, and that's the title of one of his books. And typically in main organizations in the modern world, their decision maker doesn't have skin in the game.
Mm-hmm.
So they make a decision, and it turns out to be a good decision, fine. If it was a bad decision, oh, let's invade Iraq or whatever, right? And,
Yeah.
And what's your responsibility? What's your accountability for that decision? And the same in corporations. And another important aspect of this is corporations are, by their design, and machines optimized to generate profit. But obviously, this is just one aspect of why corporations exist, right? And it's funny when you talk to, when you look at missions and visions of some companies and core values, things like that, right? So in some organizations, like, we're here to maximize their profit of state shareholders, right? And okay, when you hire an employee, right, why would he care about the profit for shareholders? I mean, he has to pretend that he does, right? And I'm very familiar with this pretension game. That was how it was played in the Soviet Union, right? But that's not exciting at all, right? So back to what I was talking about is that in a decentralized organization, what ends up happening is as more people are involved in decision making, then you have more actual humans who care about other people, who care about the world, and they have many more checks and balances to control the direction of the organization, right?
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. And I think it's in our human design to be creators, to be able to contribute to things. And when you really feel you're making that contribution, some of these systems, it's a lot more fulfilling, or can be a lot more fulfilling.
Oh
than
yeah, absolutely.
Just stuff coming down.
Absolutely,
And when you have
that's
fulfilled
huge
employees. Like, imagine how much the company's going to grow, because that's the blood of the company, is the people, right?
Yeah, and the retention, right? So because again, for many organizations, when they have to hire new people, it's really trying to compete with other organizations in terms of dollars and salaries and whatnot, and that's really hard to do, especially if you are small business, right? So we were at the time when I got out of business, we were about 130 people, something like that.
Oh, wow.
So we were still a very small organization, right? And however, we never had a problem hiring, especially in the last few years for existence, hiring really awesome software engineers, because once we start talking to them and they realize the way we operate and the way that they are given authority, responsibility, and accountability over decision making, and they can actually contribute and their voice is being heard, their eyes would just light up and like, yeah, okay, whatever, pay me somewhat comparable salary, right? And we had people who would join us and who would actually go for lower compensation, but they knew that, oh man, I'm so fed up, playing that stupid corporate game, but now, here I can feel fulfilled, right? And that's a much bigger aspect.
You can't buy that feeling.
Yeah, exactly, right?
Yeah,
so,
you can't buy that feeling.
Yeah.
No, that's amazing.
So we had lots of people who've been with us for 10, 15 years and so on, yeah.
So was there, so in the growth of the company, was it a steady growth, or was there like a turning point where something changed and you really saw things take off within? Is there anything that sort of comes to mind?
Yeah, I mean, in some ways it was pretty steady. I would say once we have achieved the break-even point, which took us quite a while, because building this kind of business, software as a service, you're going to have to make a lot of upfront investment, which then you recoup later. And actually, when I was talking to my friends, other entrepreneurs, I think about a year since after we launched the business, and I'm so excited. I'm like, hey guys, we're now generating $3,000 a month. They're like, what, 3,000 clients? No, $3,000. Oh, what are your expenses? Oh, it's $100,000. And they're like, are you crazy? Like, what kind of business is that, right? So it took us a number of years, quite a few years, to get to break-even point. And again, lots of lessons were learned over that time. And I would say that eventually, one big turning point was that when we raised prices after, I think, being I'm trying to remember, maybe 8 years in business. And that's a very classical mistake many businesses make, right? Is they underprice themselves. And we kind of did that for quite a long time. And then when we actually changed that pricing, then it became much, much easier to sustain ourselves and then continue the growth.
Yeah, I think that's something a lot of entrepreneurs fear is that asking for more, even though they're over delivering the value.
Yeah.
So what was that process like? Like, was it something you just were like, hey guys, to our customers, we're just upping the price? Did you offer more? Was
Well, first of all, it was a lot of internal debating, like, and by how much can we raise the price, and how do we communicate that, and we ended up developing a very, I think, fair process when we gave an opportunity to a lot of to all of our existing clients that if they want to keep their current price, actually they can prepay for another year or two at the current price. And then we were surprised when half of our clients did that, and that immediately shoot up our cash flow, right? So the cash flow, basically after struggling for many, many years at cash flow break even, and then we got $5 million in the bank within a few weeks, and that was pretty crazy, and
that's amazing.
Opened the road to our ability to invest.
Such a good strategy, and then but they know it's coming. So after 2 years, they're going to get the regular price.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So
that's amazing.
So and we had we took a lot of time to develop the process.
Wow, I love that.
Yeah, but and then when we sold the company, then the new owners kind of liked the concept of raising prices and started doing this on a regular basis, and that didn't really work that well.
Okay. Yeah, because sometimes
for clients,
I guess big companies they look at it in a different way, right? Some of these venture capitalists or whatever, they're really focused on profit, so they just come in and
profit is an essential aspect of running a business, right? So I would not fault them for that, right? It's just like for me, running the business is a very fine balance of I recently, a little side note, but there's this initiative called Conscious Capitalism. I don't know if you've heard of that. And one guy involved in that, his name is Raj Sisoda, I think. And he recently published a new book, and I was on the newsletter. And I'm paraphrasing him, but he said, okay, the gist of the book is that the business in the modern world has to have a purpose that improves the world. It has to be healing for people working in it, and trying to remember all the other aspects. But anyways, I'm butchering that. But the idea is that the business does not just have to generate profits for shareholders. It has to be a business that fulfills the dreams and expectations, brings fulfillment to people working in the business, but then does also something for the clients, right? And then for the world as a whole, kind of all of
I've
those
heard some
aspects.
Of these concepts before. Yeah.
How do you balance them, right? So that's really
I align with
essential.
that too, and I think I don't trust politicians to save the world. I think it's going to be entrepreneurs and businesses that are going to create solutions, but also create different ways of doing things where you're really keeping in mind, because if you look at what's doing the most damage to the world, it's the corporations probably now, I'd say, number one, and governments allowing them to get away with murder in many cases.
I would rather say enabling them, right?
Enabling them, because there's this crossing of power and position and people, all kinds of corruption. So it's going to be entrepreneurs making that decision to do it on their own dollar and of their own goodwill. So maybe they're not going to make as much profit, but really see the bigger picture, because how long is the world going to be around if we keep going at this rate? The world will probably be around. Humans, I don't know. We might have to take a step back a bit, but I really strongly believe that's going to be conscious entrepreneurs that are going to make the biggest changes in the world in the years to come.
Yeah, and basically a lot of people, they go through this progression. At first you have this picture in your mind that, and not necessarily for just entrepreneurs, but even if you working in the business and you're an employee, right? Then you have this picture in mind: when I get this much money in my bank account or this job, I'll be happy, right? And similar with entrepreneurship, when I have a business generating this much revenue or profit and blah blah blah, I'll be happy. And then that happens, and I'm like, oh, how come I'm not feeling different, right? And then I realized, that actually was a piece of bullshit, right? And then you start thinking differently, and eventually realize that, no, fulfillment is not
Well, some
in
people never
that.
get that realization. They just keep chasing. They make
Yeah,
1 million and they want 10 million. Then they make
right.
10 million, they want 100
Yeah,
million.
some
And
people never
some
grow up. Yeah.
and some people that right away they get it's like I made $1 million and I'm not happy. I'm not any happier.
Right.
What is something else? So I guess that will bring us to the next question is when you say you're a serial entrepreneur in recovery. What does the recovery mean? You're breaking away from
Yeah.
being in business or changing?
Exactly, right. So when we sold the business, which was almost exactly 2 years ago, and I worked on the business for the 3 months, and that was actually for me a very good indicator that we have built a business which was very sustainable, because I was able, as a CEO, was able to exit that within 3 months, and the business kept on going. Also, thanks to my business partner, whose name is also Dmitry. He used to be running our Moscow office, but then he moved to Toronto, took over the CEO job from me when I left. But anyways, and then from January 1st, 2018, I stopped, having that identity of busy CEO running the business and doing whatnot, um, and in the last year and 9 months, I have done very little businessy things. It's been really all about my personal journey.
Do you ever get that urge that you should be doing work, or like that when you work so long for so hard, it's almost like wired in your brain?
Yeah, no, totally. That
and
was a big shift for me to go through, but I think I was ready for that. And I don't really get the urge. And, I would say my main criteria these days is like, what are the things that give me internal joy? And sometimes those things are like mentoring and coaching other people. Sometimes it's doing some other things like angel investing in certain business, and I'm involved in some other things here and there. But I didn't have the urge to kind of go back to and do that thing again. But I felt like, okay, now it's a different phase of my life that I want to spend much more on reflection and deeper personal growth and so on.
So tell me a bit about that. What are the things that you started going in? Were you already into like personal development as you were selling your company? Was it something you've always been into? Or
Yeah, I've always been in that space. So, that was a very natural progression of, I've always been a bookworm, reading lots of books, and then eventually read about stuff like personal development, self-development, whatnot.
So where did you start? Who was the first couple books? Can you remember which ones was like that first eye-opening?
Tony Robbins was a big impact on me, probably when I was maybe 25, 26 kind of range, right? And I read his books, and they made a big impact. But other big names in the space like Brian Tracy and Jack Canfield and whatnot, right? So I read a bunch of those books, and so I've always been on that trajectory. And as I've been learning about the business and realizing also like, business consists of people, and for business to grow, people have to grow, and I love growing. And then that's actually always been my role in the business, as whatever I was working on for myself and learning and finding those tools and seminars and conferences, books, whatever, then bringing them into business and sharing them with people in the business. And actually over the years we've built a business where a lot of people, actually, that was one of the core values of our business, as ongoing growth, and growth not just like in terms of numbers, but growth actually in terms of personal growth of all the individuals in the business.
Yeah, beautiful.
Yeah.
So what are some of the things that you're into right now? Like what would a daily routine of Dmitry look like? Is it physical exercise, meditation? Is there any specific practices you have?
There are many different things that I'm doing, and my days are different. But yeah, I mean, going to some of their staples, like meditation is definitely one of their big staples in my life. I've been now meditating daily for several years, and these days I meditate twice a day. So that's one. Yeah, I've always been trying to take good physical care of my body.
How much were you meditating when you were running the company versus after you stopped? And did you see a big difference when you started meditating more?
Well, definitely I started meditating much more and kind of going much deeper, and also doing that and different way, if you will, because before that, like, oh, let me try to use this app and, some stuff I picked up on this book. But nowadays, for example, I work with a wonderful meditation coach who I learned through his podcast, actually, one amazing podcast, Deconstructing Self. His name is Michael Taft, and I've been working with him as my meditation coach for the last, let's say, 6-7 months, and he's been very helpful in terms of fine-tuning my practice.
So what was the biggest tip that he gave you that you felt a shift in your meditation? Was there one thing that stands out to you? Because I know a lot of people struggle.
I don't think it's not one tip, and again, before him, I also worked with a different meditation coach, and those two guys, they directed my approach to meditation, or redirected it, or refined that very significantly. And also, there was a book that I read a couple of years ago. I think the title of the book is "Mastering the Core Teachings of the Buddha" by Daniel Ingram, and that book was really wonderful. I read a lot of books about meditation and Buddhism, but that book was really quintessential, very deep summary of meditation and different schools of meditation, different approaches, and the background and details.
So the biggest shifts, like philosophies around what meditation was, or was it like actual techniques?
Actual techniques, right? Which
can you share one that stands out? Is there anything specific?
There are many different schools of meditation, right? And I played with focusing on my breathing and doing this and that. And it was interesting because at some point I had a conversation with my meditation coach, and he's like, yeah, it's like meditation schools coming from Southeast Asia. This is kind of their birthplace of meditation, right? A lot of them, they very focused on breathing. But the thing is, like, for a modern person who lives in this very busy environment and has a very busy mind, that's not a very interesting object to meditate on. And I was, oh yeah, okay, you're right. I always struggled with meditating on my breathing. But then they gave me other different techniques, right? And first I played with a concept called open noting, but then there was Michael Taft. He's been, now my practice, I rotate through different types of sessions. So some sessions when I concentrate on my emotional sensations, some sessions when I concentrate on my physical sensations, on mental imagery, mental talk.
So it's the subtle things. Once you start quieting your mind, you're able to sort of pick up on some of these. I guess that's as you get more advanced into meditation, because some people can't even get to quiet their mind.
Of course, it took me a long time, right? And still, sometimes I struggle with that, right? And again, one of the techniques that he gave me is like, now I start my meditation practice with a certain type of breathing, and that kind of helps me to get into more concentrated state, if you will, and then I actually start focusing on the core of my practice of that particular session. So yeah, it's like whatever you do, and that took me a long time to actually get to that. Like for many years of my life, I've been using books as my primary tool for learning and growth, but then over the years I started realizing, but then I can also learn from people. How interesting, right?
How interesting.
And I also realized, in hindsight, I didn't use that before because I was kind of scared of people.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
I would think most people would be scared of you. A big Russian guy,
right.
Intimidating. I would be if I came into in a workplace.
Right.
So why the fear? Just
Well, first of all, right, this whole concept of the costumes that we wear, right? You probably have seen my son in terms of his interviews or whatever, right?
Yeah, I've seen some pictures, stuff. Yeah,
right? Yeah. So he's very thin, right? And that's my natural genetic makeup as well. I was that way before I started exercising, and then I built a bigger frame, if you will, right? Why did I do that? Because I was scared, right? Because I was scared of people, and that was my way of protecting myself. And I was like, okay, so if I get bigger, then people would not want to fuck with me, which was true. But also, I realized eventually their downfall of that, the downside of that is also, as I'm scared of that, they look at me, I'm this big guy. I also for most of my life, I've been really good at suppressing my emotions, right? So they look at me, and they see this big guy who sits there without much emotion on their face, and then they kind of scared of me, but I'm scared of them, kind of thing, right? And we disconnected, right? And then over the years I realized how messed up is that, right?
Do you think that's something that came out of being raised in a socialist country, that not showing your emotion? Is that something that, or is that just a more personal thing, do you think?
I think that for the generation, of my parents, it was kind of very common thing, and like especially in the Soviet bloc, for sure, because you kind of have to be on your tiptoes all the time, especially after all the crazy purging and the mass murders that those countries had to go through. So people have to learn how to hide their true emotions and whatnot. And it's kind of funny when people who grew up in the Soviet bloc and they come over, let's say, to the United States, and they say, "Oh, those Americans with their fake smiles," right? The thing is, like, because they think that if somebody smiles at you, that means that they're really
Trying to get something out of you? Or?
no, like, but because it's very unusual. Like in Russia, people normally would not smile at you in a public setting, right? And if somebody smiles at you, that kind of means that you have a pretty good connection with that person. But then they realize, oh, that guy is smiling at me, but we don't really have that connection. What's going on? But yeah, that's just like their difference and psychological upbringing.
I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
So I guess my next question, well, there's two ways that we'll go. You brought up Vitalik, so I want to ask you a few questions about him, but I also want to ask you about really getting into your emotions and some of the tools that you've used. I think we spoke about last time we talked, some psychedelics and stuff like that. So which way you want to go first? You want to talk about plant medicines?
Yeah, emotions is probably, I started on that journey maybe somewhat, I would say, 10 years ago. One tool or thing, resource that has really helped me was that is I've been a member of this organization called EOR, Entrepreneurs Organization, of their Toronto chapter. And one aspect of that organization, they put you into this small groups called forums. So it's a peer groups of entrepreneurs, people who run businesses, and then you meet on a monthly basis. And then they give you certain training, and then they give you tools and foundation, and then kind of it's up for the group to kind of direct themselves. And that peer group has been a major source of personal growth for me, and learning to, like, starting with that basic training that they give you, but then kind of enhancing that over the years. And we used other wonderful coaches and facilitators, but learning to the whole concept of sharing and then not giving people advice, but just kind of supporting them, supporting their emotions, and being vulnerable, all of those things. That was kind of one of the major things. And as always, for me also, that was books has always been a major source of growth for me. And at some point, I was reading books about emotions because I was really curious, like, people talk about emotions. What the hell is that? Like, how come I don't have those emotions, right? And then I read the book, like, oh, those sensations inside of you, oh, that's emotions. And I started looking deeper into that. And then eventually discovered plant medicines, and they have been a really wonderful facilitator of me opening up to my sensitivity, to my emotions, vulnerability, and things like that, as well as meditation, actually, right? Because meditation has, especially in the last, I would say, couple of years, has made me so much more sensitive to my internal world and my emotions. Sometimes I'm like, oh my God, I wish I could go back and just suppress them, and I kind of don't really want that. But sometimes, when you're full of strong emotions, right? Sometimes in the moment, it can be very difficult.
Overwhelming, yeah. Well,
but you just want to finish that thought, right? But I also know that the price that you pay when you do not allow yourself to experience emotions is very high. You suppress them and you think you've dealt with them, but no, they stuck with you forever, right? And they sit in you and they keep bugging you, and then you keep kind of moving forward, but in a very unconscious way. And I'm like, oh, why the hell do they do that? Oh, why do they react in this way? Or like, so all of those things are really past emotions stuck in you and they still bugging you.
Yeah, I say the emotions are like a GPS to your soul. They're trying to get your attention because there's something that you need to bring your attention to. So,
Right.
it's just this another tool that we have, that once we have the awareness to it, once we stop suppressing it, then we can use it as, okay, why am I feeling like this? Or why did this thing trigger me and make me feel this way?
Yes.
There's usually a program running in the subconscious mind, something you picked up childhood or over your lifetime that you don't want to pay attention to. It might be painful, or sometimes it could be the opposite as well. Like just maybe you're suppressing joy, and you feel joy, and all of a sudden you put it down because maybe you feel you're not worthy of joy, or it's not okay to be happy because someone told you that, or you're around that, who knows what. But yeah, I find it it's such a tool once you start having the awareness to it. And for me, like, plant medicine also brought this to my awareness a lot, where I would have this incredible sensations of these feelings, like amplified, like either sadness like I'd never felt it before, or like joy where I'd be crying where I'd never felt it before, and I'd feel so alive, you know? So maybe, like, what are some of your most impactful psychedelic experiences, or any one that stands out where you had like an aha moment? Because it seems like you have a lot of learning and logical thinking and analytical mind, and then getting into meditation, then psychedelics hits you from a whole different angle altogether.
Yeah, exactly right. So you realize, oh, you have your analytical brain, but that's actually just a small part of you, right? And you think that you're in charge, you make those decisions, but no, that's your emotional brain. Your emotions actually, nowadays, the more I learn about psychology and experientially, as well as, the modern theory about that, I realized that people think, oh, I've made this decision, I'm doing this, and I made it through this criteria. Yeah, maybe, probably not. Really what happened is that your emotions made the decision, and then your thinking analytical brain is your PR agent. It's like, oh, your conscious brain, your PR agent, who came up with a nice explanation for why you decided to go that way, right? And you commented about suppressing joy. Actually, the way I think about this is that not so much that people frequently suppress joy, but it's like when we suppress emotions, we suppress all of them, right? So for the majority of my life, I was very even keel, right? My emotional range was very, very narrow, which was awesome in some ways because, in a business setting and relationships, I was able to manage my emotions and go through difficult situations, but it kind of sucked because it was really, really hard for me to be happy and joyful, right? Hard to impossible, because again, when we suppress them, we suppress all of them, and that was the big aha moment for me. And one metaphor I came across a long time ago, which I really liked about this, about emotions and reactions, is the metaphor of a splinter. Right, so splinter gets into your arm, and it's kind of painful, and it sits there, and you kind of have two choices: that you can try to remove it, or you can try to bandage it and try not to kind of allow things to touch that, right? And most of the time, the trauma that happens to you, that splinter, that's in your childhood, and you, as a child, you don't have the resources, or you don't know they actually can remove it, and you cannot bear the pain of removing that back then, right? So then you kind of cover it up, or your brain, that's what it does for you. It covers it up, and then it actually starts directing your life, like, oh, you know what? Let's try to use that arm a little bit less. Oh, let's change the doors in your house so that kind of you will never touch that splinter, right? And we end up directing all of our lives in such a way that those splinters, and we have a whole bunch of them, every single human out there, right? Then we become this disconfigured, blobs that kind of we try to go through life to ensure that nobody touches those painful splinters still sitting on us, right? And plant medicines are some of their tools that can actually help us go to that and finally remove that splinter. And back to a question about different experiences, I've had many deep experiences that helped me clear a lot of their past stuff, and I'll mention a couple. One of them was with ayahuasca, and frankly, that was the most painful, agonizing experience of my life. Like, I was in such a agony and pain for a few hours that it was pretty crazy, but that trip was also that brought me so much more insights into my self-realization about like all, the pain that was sitting in me and driving me for all of those years, and so much more empathy. And yeah, it's changed me for the better. And another tool I want to mention is 5-MeO DMT, or toad medicine, right? And when I did it the last time, I just took it, and then I was just screaming like crazy for 20 minutes, rolling on the floor and screaming again, like extremely difficult experience, right? But what was happening to me is like really those stuck emotions from the past that
All coming out
I
in one
have done
shot.
I have done a good job suppressing them for many years, and now they were coming to the surface, right? And then after that, as I was working with a wonderful shaman, and he was helping me integrate my experience, and I told him that one of my a bunch of takeaways I had from that very difficult experience, but one of them was that okay, definitely want to make sure that I will try to live through my emotions in the future so they don't get stuck with me in this way, and I don't have to live in this way. Second is that when that happens and you have this clearing, this cleansing, then you reconnect with that peacefulness inside of you and realize, oh my God, it's always there. It just most of the time it's totally inaccessible to most of us just because of all this accumulated junk, accumulated pain, accumulated unprocessed emotions, right?
Absolutely. And that's why I think psychedelics, one of the things they do is they're a purifier.
Yeah.
They purify your energy. When you're holding on to all this lower vibrational emotions or memories or whatever, first thing it's going to do, the ayahuasca, the 5-MeO, is going to pull it right out of you.
Yeah.
And then once you sort of clear in yourself, so much the insights come, that clarity that comes after. It's like, okay, then the teachings come. Then
clarity, the peacefulness. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So I've even had experiences in ayahuasca where I realized, and this was my last trip to Costa Rica, where I would feel nausea when I was getting too much in my head and thinking about things. It was the thought, it was overthinking, was that I wasn't just being present, I was just like up here, then I'd feel nausea.
Yeah.
And what the ayahuasca was telling me was like, if you can't relax your mind, then we can't teach you anything. So I'm going to make you purge. But if you can relax yourself, the nausea will go away and we can move forward. So it's just really getting like meditating with the ayahuasca, was just like calming my mind down, just like anything that would come up, observe it and just breathe it out, and just like automatically the nausea would go away and I didn't throw up, which is rare for me because usually it's like one cup in, one cup out. I know it's coming out, but this time it wasn't like that. And I took 2 or 3 cups and it held true. And I was like, wow, it's powerful. Just like slowing down the exhale, letting your heart rate slow down.
Wow.
And then I realized after, at the end of the ceremony, a guy collapsed. I think he was dehydrated and like hit his head. He was okay. As you go for water, as I say, dehydrated. And all of a sudden I started worrying. And I was worried about this guy. I was thinking too much about, oh my God, what if he's hurt? Was to the hospital. All of a sudden I got nauseous again. And I was like, oh, you're thinking too much. Just relax. Like the situation will take care of itself. Everything's gonna be okay. As soon as I relaxed myself, the nausea went away and I was able to handle the situation so much better. Whereas when I was such a teacher. And it was like these subtle things that I'd never realized before, because always when I would go into the experience, I was like looking for the fireworks, wanted to see the lights and really analyze, oh, what does that mean? What is that? Where it's like more like now I'm sort of realize like, just relax, sit back, observe the subtleties, and then we're going to really teach you some insights about like life and some truth. So, yeah, super interesting. And I know that feeling because there's been times where I've gone through that same pain for like 2 hours.
Yeah.
And the medicine was like, I was like, okay, I'm ready to let this go. It's like, no, you're doing the work now. Get it all out. Get it. For me, it was one of the times it was resentment. And I knew it was resentment because I asked, and it was like, I felt it right in my stomach, just pain. And it was like, think about all the things you're resentful for, like all the people, and just like build it up and then forgive. And it was this whole process. And then eventually I purged it and I felt 1,000 pounds lighter. But yeah, it's an interesting thing that I think needs more awareness and done in the right way in our society. Cause,
totally. And I'm so excited to see all the research that is finally, being done again, right? After they stopped it back in the 70s, but there is so much going on.
It really helps when people like yourself that can show that, you're professional, you had a business, you're a dad, you're responsible, and you can talk about it. Whereas a lot of people, they think that it's just like a certain fraction of the population that they have this stereotypical image of who does psychedelics
Right.
and what they're used for. But the more people that come forward and say, hey, this changed my life, and it didn't make it any worse, it actually made it so much better, then more people are going to start like really like putting their eyes on it and moving towards it. So
yeah, it was really interesting to watch when I had my experience with that, which was about 5 years ago for the first time. And as I mentioned before, all of my life is really about learning, but then I learn and then I share. And you might have heard the saying that you teach what you have to learn. And I guess that's one of my ways to integrate what I'm learning, is like I share it with people around me. So people around me, they know that, oh, Timo went to this conference with Tony Robbins, so he read this book about reinventing organization, so this and that. And then when I came to people close to me, like, oh, psychedelics and this, and like, what? Drugs? And that was really confusing for them. But it's like they know me as a guy who
they have that trust,
who they trust, and they know that I think very carefully about things, and I'm very cautious as well. Like, so for many of them, it took a while to kind of reconcile that. But I'm happy to see many people around me also opening up to that and being served by those tools in their own personal growth journeys. Yeah.
Amazing. So I just want to thank you for that. Thank you. It's really, really important. So we'll switch gears for a second here. I want to talk about your son, Vitalik.
Yeah.
So I have two kids myself, a 5-year-old and an 8-year-old.
Yeah.
So, I guess many people would classify Vitalik as a genius or a brainchild. He invented, or one of the founders of Ethereum.
He invented Ethereum.
He invented
Ethereum.
Yes, okay.
So, yeah.
So what's that like as a parent? Is it something that you felt like you guided him, you pointed him in the right direction, or was it something like you noticed that he just had this gift and that was who he was? Like when you're parenting a child like that, or like how do you parent a child like that?
Yeah. And I have 3 kids, right? Besides Vitalik,
Okay.
I have 2 daughters, right? And my overall thinking about that is that parents in general, we kind of overthink our own importance and impact that we make on our kids, right? So nowadays, I think about that way more of we have to create the space and support them, but like trying to push them in a certain direction, that just doesn't work. Vitalik went into this direction. My daughter Misha, she's 11 and she's very different. Like, and as she was growing up,
She's the artist.
Yeah,
She's
right.
the artist. Okay.
Me being interested in computers and science and math, like I also tried to kind of expose her to all of that stuff, and she looked at, didn't work for her. But then she became, and she's developing as a really wonderful artist, the way she draws, her creativity and all of that stuff, right? So, and it's awesome to see that, because like I don't have that side in me at all, right? But then that's her natural talent, right? And with Vitalik, it was early on very obvious that he's a very, very gifted child, which was very exciting, but also brought all kinds of challenges with that, right? And when he was growing up, I had all kinds of fears and concerns, and also based on my own experience, right? Because I was a smart kid, and I had really, really big issues in terms of socializing with other people, and and meeting girls and whatnot, right? So that kind of, I was projecting my own fears onto him, and being really concerned about how will he be able to learn all of those things about social interaction and this and that.
So did you try to teach him about that, or did you more like hands off?
So first and foremost, as his propensity for numbers and math became obvious, then obviously we did our best to support that, right? Not so much to push him, but he has that, so let's try to support him as much as we can in all of that, and many different ways, and books, and he's got his own computer since he was I guess 3 years old, right? And back then that was a big deal because we didn't have those nice tablets. Like he had an old IBM PC that we used to use, and then we gave it to him, and he loved to play in Excel and do all kinds of stuff there. And when he was 7, he created this wonderful document with dozens of pages, which was very detailed with charts. It was a encyclopedia of some fictional bunny characters, but it was so full of creativity, but also so much math and thinking in that, right? So we supported his growth in that, and then kind of sending him to the school of where they were teaching him coding, and initially I taught him some Visual Basic and stuff like that. Going to
like an actual school in Toronto, like
yeah,
a coding school.
Yeah. So kind of doing stuff to support his talent, right? But then also trying to support his development and in other ways, right? And how do I help him learn how to bike, right? And how do we help him to socialize with his friends, in school? And but at some point, the biggest thing that's kind of really helped us at some point is letting that go and realize that he's got his own path, and kind of trust the universe that the things that he has to deal with, he will deal with. And that's pretty much what happened, right? Because, for example, communication skills, right? That was one of the areas of concerns because his brain was going so fast that it was hard for him to communicate with other children and sometimes even with teachers because he was way ahead of them, right? But and we had some concerns about that. But then eventually in high school, he opened up his talent as a debater and speaker and whatnot, and now after 6 years of doing nonstop public speaking all the time, he's an awesome speaker.
Expert now,
who can explain very, very complex topics in a very simple, very human way. So that's.
And so how did it affect you when sort of Ethereum took off? Was it like, because now he's what? How old was he when?
He was 19 when he came up with the concept. Yeah. So he's almost 26 now.
26,
25, soon to be 26.
So was there any fears around that, being, like having that much power as a 19, 20-year-old, and
Not really, like I was excited for him, and I could see, he went to University of Waterloo after high school, but then after about a year, he decided to drop out. And it was funny when he came home and he talked to us about that, and we all supported him in that because, you know what? Like, if you're bored there and you're not getting what you think you want to get, then by all means, because we trusted his judgment, we trusted that, we knew that he will keep learning, right? And for me, that's kind of a lot of confusion these days between learning and formal education, right? And I think formal education is not that great for learning, today. Right?
Just had this conversation this morning, and as a parent, though, there's not many options because there's this fear, like, if I don't put my kid through this education system, where am I gonna put them?
Right.
Because I think around the world, like the North American school systems are like somewhere in the 20s. They're not even the top 10.
Yeah.
And a lot of them is like less actual school, more creativity, more getting out in nature, more letting them do what they want to do, what they're
interested in. And the biggest
in.
danger with formal education, I think, is that for many kids, they actually make them, kids learn to hate learning, right? And that sucks big time. Because it's funny, looking at my own example, growing up, they were feeding us a lot of Russian classical literature, and there are lots of wonderful Russian writers, but the way it was being fed to us was so boring, so uninteresting, whatever, right? So that as a grown-up man, sometimes I talk to people here and like, oh, I love Dostoevsky, I love that. I'm like, yeah, you know what? Like, I haven't read any of that stuff since my childhood because they really drilled the hate of those, subjects into me. And that happens with a lot of kids, is that they, through that very poorly designed education process, they learn to hate their actual process of learning. So for me, as parents, what we want to do is we want to find ways for them to help them learn and realize that there are many other ways to learn than just in schools. And luckily, there are many new tools on the horizon, from some wonderful games you can play. Not all games are bad, right? And there are lots of games where people learn all kinds of really interesting skills. And really, for me, good education, good learning process has to be like a game. It has to be fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So you mentioned earlier Vitalik is much smarter than you. When did you realize that? When was like the shifting of the gears when you realized the son became smarter than dad, and how was that for you? Just a normal thing, exciting.
It's a normal thing, like again, there are so many
Beating
many
your chest
different
that first time you just
so many different dimensions to being smart, right?
Mhm.
And people talk about IQ, which is one of many dimensions, right? But then your emotional intelligence, and there are many other things, right? So I have my life experience, and then I have my skills that I have learned, and he has his own very different path, and he has inspired me in many different ways, right? So for me, it's I'm learning from his journey, from him, right? And there was time that he was learning from me, and I was
beautiful.
feeding him stuff.
I tell people all the
right?
time, I learned so much from my kids, even
Yeah.
at a young age, 5 and 8, like the curiosity and the way they
Right.
live their life and the things they're afraid of and what makes them tick. And, when you, and I guess that's like with anything in life, when you start having awareness to everything around, you can learn from anything. You
Yeah.
can learn from strangers, you could learn from plants, you could learn from just looking at the ocean.
Right.
But when you have these things that you actually focus on, like your kids, you can learn so much more.
Absolutely.
So are you into cryptocurrency as well? Is it something that you're really invested in, interested in, or is it more of a
not in the
Vitalik thing?
cryptocurrency as such, but the concept of decentralization and blockchain as such,
It's
right?
more your thing,
yeah, because it's really about how can we build decentralized institutions instead of centralized systems that we have, and they
Which
can
goes
be
back to your whole Soviet experience, and
Yeah.
now you have this
right. Yeah,
this view.
exactly.
So
How can we build better? So really, that's the theme of my life. Decentralized organization structures, right? And now blockchain is just a new, better way that enables those kind
So
of.
give me some examples of what you think can be accomplished with blockchain that would really be like a disruptor into what the current society is. Is there anything particular, like politics or like voting or
Hopefully, all of the above, right?
all of the above? Yeah.
It's still hard to see that. There is so much experimentation is going on. And I'm sorry that I'm going to miss their Ethereum biggest annual event. It's called DEF CON, and it's happening in Japan this year, and I just could make it. But it's a wonderful conference when you interact with people who are actually building, who are excited to build all of these new initiatives and experiments on using the blockchain.
Is there one
tech.
that you're really excited about that stands out? Is there a single initiative that you think has a lot of potential that, resonates with you?
No, because really what people are doing now is they building a lot of underlying building blocks. Like even Ethereum itself, it's really a toy still, right? But it's rapidly maturing toy.
Because a lot of people don't understand what blockchain is, or even
Right.
even cryptocurrency. A lot of people don't really understand what it is. Most people think it's an investment. You put your money in, it goes up, it goes down,
Right.
you take it out. But is there any sort of simple example of something that you see as like a potential, like how it could change things? For those listeners that might not be so versed in what blockchain, what the potentialities of it is.
I would say for most people, it would make a lot of sense just to understand how Bitcoin works, right? Bitcoin is the granddaddy of all of that stuff. That's what started this whole movement. And Bitcoin is a digital currency that runs without any kind of central authority, right? And it's a fascinating thing. And that's actually, I learned about that, and I mentioned that to Vitalik. He got really interested about that, and that's how he got into the space, right? And
so you have a little bit to do with the founding of the creation of Ethereum, because I guess you planted that seed, right?
Yeah. But for me, it was just an interesting concept, and I was busy running my business.
We're losing a bit of the audio was flickering a bit. It's back now.
Yeah. Okay.
How are we doing for time? 55. Okay. Is that the time there? 55 minutes?
No, it's 8:27. We've been rolling for about I'm gonna say about an hour and 15.
Okay, I'm just gonna wrap it up then. So we were just saying.
Yeah. So talking about Bitcoin, and there are many great books about how it works, and actually the books, you don't have to learn how the technology works, but to learn about the concept, right? Because again, if you look at the current monetary system, I have lots of problems with the current monetary system, from the fact that it leads to the central banks and all the institutions around banks to capture the majority of profits from that financial system, to the fact that governments are able to print basically infinite amounts of money and then finance crazy wars and whatnot with that, right? So, and Bitcoin is
And the inflation just hurts all the average people that can't.
So all of that stuff, right? And again, Bitcoin is an invention that
But I hear that
changes all of that.
banks now are creating their own cryptocurrencies. Do you think the decentralized systems really have a chance to go against these old, ancient institutions when it comes to this?
I think so.
You think
I think
so?
so. Yeah,
I guess
because
it comes
really
with
it's
education. People have to sort of adopt it. That's the big thing? It's more
it's about the
adoption thing.
trust, right? And if you look around, you can also see that people actually very rapidly losing trust in any kind of
Everything.
centralized institutions,
Yeah.
right? And the government and whatever, Facebook and central banks.
So I
right?
guess what's next, and I guess is what everyone's working on, is ways to sort of integrate that in in an application, so that's easy, like an easy user interface for people to use it and apply.
Yeah. So what's happening is that, like, actually, their actual underlying technology, right? Their Bitcoin as such works. It's whatever. Ethereum is a much bigger concept, much more complicated. So it's Bitcoin is digital money, and Ethereum is digital anything. You can put, insurance. You can put real estate, tokens, ownership of stocks, whatever you want to do. You can do it on Ethereum. And to realize that vision, that took them quite a long time, and we finally get in there. And now, as this underlying layer is being finally realized, and people doing lots of little experiments, and like, let's say a couple of years ago, people did this little game called CryptoKitties, and it was really about collectibles.
I heard about that.
Right.
Yeah.
And that little stupid game, I mean, not stupid, but I'm just using that label. It's a little fun game, but it basically killed the whole network very quickly because
It took off, right?
It took off, right? And
You gotta be careful with people and cats, man. People love cats.
I know, right? But the point is the technology was not ready for that yet, and we finally get in there. So as they're, on the one hand, their underlying technology is being developed, and there are lots of contenders. I still have big belief in Ethereum because of their community, by the way. And on the other hand, there is so much experimentation been happening. People building like, this little decentralized insurance for pets, or this is a new way to send money abroad. That's kind of an obvious one, but this is a lending platform, and lots of experimentation happening. And those experiments now, kind of, as you rightly said, it's really about building things which are usable by normal people, because up until now, those things, they have been pretty much the domain of techies, because you have to do this with this address, and then, by the way, if you lose this password, all of your money is gone and nobody can recover that, right? So you have to make things much more usable, and that's being worked on by many, many, many smart, wonderful people.
That's good to hear.
Yeah,
I'm excited. I have a fear of using like cryptocurrency, because I think, like, from a financial perspective, like I've invested in it, but like if it goes up, that means I bought something for one. You always hear the story of the guy who bought the pizza with like a few thousand bitcoins,
right?
Which now that pizza is like a $5 million pizza or something like that, right? So that's just always in the back of my head. But I think if it comes more mainstream, it'll be a little bit less volatile, I'm thinking, but who knows? Okay, so just a couple more questions wrapping up here. We went a lot of different places, covered a lot of things. Just some quick questions, maybe quick answers. What's one thing that you're curious about learning about now? So what's like the next thing that you don't really know, but you're looking to learn more about? Is there anything particular that is on the horizon for you? Whether about like a technology, or maybe a language, or maybe a martial art, or anything.
Right. Yeah.
Is there anything that just piques your curiosity that you're...
Well, languages is one of my hobbies, so I always kind of play with languages and learning them a little bit here, a little bit there. And Vitalik is really good with languages. Right now, continuing the learning about the human consciousness, right? And let's say in a few weeks from today, I'm going to go to California. They have this annual conference called Transformative Technologies, right? And again, if you look at different there are many different ways you can use technology, right? You can use technology for good and for bad, and I think there are many wonderful ways we can leverage technology that we have not discovered yet. And one huge and growing area of applying technology is emotional well-being, right? So things like the Oura Ring, the meditation apps, all those trackers and whatnot. But also there are many more advanced tools like that, like people tools that for stimulation of your neocortex and whatnot, right? So that's kind of one area of human consciousness, brain-computer interfaces that I have always been very curious about that, and I'm going to invest more of my time in the coming years.
Okay, we're going to talk about that after the podcast. Got a few other questions.
Yeah.
So just along that line, what is an app or a gadget or a piece of technology that you use in your everyday life that's a game changer for you? I know you just mentioned the Oura Ring. Is there anything specific that you find?
Oura Ring is pretty awesome, and including the fact that I can use it to track my meditation sessions and kind of use and it measures HRV, heart rate variability, which is an interesting way to evaluate your concentrated state, how concentrated you are. I would say for many people, one tool, one hobby that I have is computer security.
Computer security?
Yeah. Always been really interested in that. And it's funny because when I was trying to get Vitalik interested in this whole topic of computer security, he never really got interested in security as such, but he got really interested in cryptography. And cryptography is an essential aspect of cryptocurrency and Bitcoin and whatnot, because it's heavily math-based and whatnot. So anyways, like tools that store your passwords, like LastPass, so 1Password, there are many wonderful tools that I use for that. One particular app that I use on a daily basis, it's called Way of Life, and it's a wonderful tool just to keep track of daily habits, because I know that we all have wonderful goals and aspirations, and I have my system of how I track my goals and other things. But then the big question for me is always, how do you translate your big lofty goals into daily things? So I'm a big believer into small daily habits, and Way of Life has been a wonderful tool for me to keep track of many different things in my life, from my meditation to taking certain vitamins to exercise to whatnot, whatever is my current focus.
Beautiful. Okay, last question. Is there anything that I didn't ask you that you wish I would have asked you about?
We covered the broad range of topics, right? And
that's a good answer. That means we got through most.
Yeah, we got through most. The question of politics, the question of social media. There are so many other things that we could potentially talk about, right?
Sure, we can have another one of these conversations in the future as well.
Exactly.
Cool. So we'll just end on some gratitude. Just share one thing you're really grateful for right now in your life. I'm really grateful to have you here today and obviously get to know you a little bit better. And so thank you for everything you shared. I think you shared a lot of valuable stuff that a lot of people can take away, whether they're in meditation or they're into business or whatever it is. So that's what I'm grateful for. Yeah. Is there anything in your life right now that really brings you a lot of gratitude?
I'm grateful to have people in my life, people close to me, including my Ep.04, people who I know that when I'm going through very challenging times and emotions, and every human being out there going through those, that I know that I can share that with them. And I don't really need advice or solution from them, but it makes a huge difference when you have people close to you who can just listen to you and know that you suffer, and they can give you a hug, and they can just kind of understand where you are, and they can cry with you, and this is how we heal through interaction with other people. So I'm grateful for having those kind of people in my life.
Amazing. So thank you so much for being here. Do you have anything, I know you're retired now, so usually at the end I'll ask if there's anywhere that people, if they want to get a hold of you, if you don't want to give that out, that's fine. I know you're I
have a website with my last name, Buterin.com.
So okay, so if anyone's interested in reaching out to Buterin.com is where you can find.
There's a list of different channels where people are going to reach me.
Awesome. Yeah, the audio's flickering in my ears again, which it's like a binaural beat going on.
Yeah.
So check out Buterin.com. Dmitry, thank you so much. I'd love to have you on again. We can have another conversation. And yeah, thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you, Giovanni. Good to talk to you.
Yeah, awesome.